And so to be an ecosystem weaver is, I think, at its foundation, this sort of return to our deepest nature as relational beings. And it's not so much a new fact that we're learning about, it's more of a remembrance on a very deep personal level. An ecosystem is not only the various organisms and species that make it, but it's mainly the relationships that bind these organisms together and the quality of those relationships. And so the idea when using this term to define what some may traditionally refer to as partnership development is to seed a new way of collaborating and of working together, one that is inherently symbiotic and synergistic, where organizations, networks do not only seek their personal benefit, but really the relationships are woven in a way that bring about mutual benefit and also benefit to the whole that we are part of. And the weaving metaphor, of course, I find it extremely beautiful. This idea of braiding together different strands.
Hi, I'm Rudy, and this is Voices of Emergence. Today, we're honored to welcome Hajar Tazi, a neurodivergent storyteller, poet, and ecosystem weaver at the service of Pachamama's flourishing. Hajar's path spans regenerative education, solidarity economies, rights of nature, and the inner dimensions of systems change. She currently serves as a director of ecosystem weaving at the Synergia Institute, board member at Shareable and Gaia Education, ambassador of the Inner Development Goals, and member of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature, among many other roles. Through initiatives such as the Great Weaving Game and as a fellow of the Bioleadership Project and Rhizome, Hajar is exploring how poetry, play, and imagination can become seeds for collective transformation. She walks with communities, reimagining how we might live, love, and flourish together with the community of life. Welcome, Hajar.
Thank you, Rudy. Thank you, Alex, for the invitation. It's a joy to be with the two of you today.
Our pleasure as well. So, when you hear the word emergence, what awakens in you?
So I feel emergence brings up weirdly. I feel maybe it's just my sort of interest in mysticism, but there is a sense of merging with the sort of pool of energy from which everything emanates and one day returns to. And there is also a sense of energy in motion and the feeling of opening up almost somatically to our lived experience in trust and in communion with the life that surrounds us.
Hajar, it's great to meet you. I see that you like surfing and stargazing and being with nature. You're very much into ecosystem. You're also a poet. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got here? And was there a turning point in your life that deepened your purpose?
Thank you for this beautiful question. Yeah, I feel as though as a child, I used to have pretty often actually experiences of mystical union with the whole. And I didn't quite have the sort of cognitive tools to really grasp that, nor to communicate it to people around me. But there was just this sense that, oh, I may not be this physical body, only this physical body. I may not only be this persona that I've been taught to play. I may be actually much wider than that. And to start also kind of recognizing the fact that I am and hold multitudes inside of me, within me, in my inner ecology. And that led me to sort of question everything around me, the educational system that I was in, and this idea that as a child, I had to be taught everything about the world in a way that was solely directed towards my rational left brain. And I felt as though really the goal of the educational system and society at large was to erase parts of me, other ways of being, other ways of knowing, other ways of inhabiting the earth in right relationship. And that process felt very challenging. I was actually diagnosed as neurodivergent because I could not sit still. I did not really want to be told about the world and nature. I wanted to be in the world as nature. Um, and so that later led me to the study of philosophy and to also study Eastern spirituality, sustainable development, and to start sort of deconstructing these myths and stories that I was brought up with, that I inherited, and to begin planting seeds for the emergence of other stories, other systems, other structures that sustain life and that foster a sense of interconnectedness and co-becoming, not just individual achievements, but collectively, what can we do together to tend to this beautiful home?
Wow, what a beautiful introduction already. Yeah, I see that you're very active. You have many different roles. So I think also that you're probably a very good ecosystem weaver, yeah, because you have all these roles. So I wanted to learn a bit more like what does ecosystem weaving look like for you? And how do you apply that in practice, like also in between all your roles? And why is that important?
So the use, first of all, of the terminology of ecosystem is very intentional. It's this idea, once again, that we do not just inhabit nature, we are nature. And so our social, political, economic systems are ecosystems. And that already, this sort of reframing allows us to see whether the systems that we create and we're a part of actually support the wider systems, the biological systems, which sustain us. And so to be an ecosystem weaver is, I think, yeah, at its foundation, this sort of return to our deepest nature as relational beings. And it's not so much a new fact that we're learning about, it's more of a remembrance on a very deep personal level. An ecosystem is not only the various organisms and species that make it, but it's mainly the relationships that bind these organisms together and the quality of those relationships. And so the idea when using this term to define what some may traditionally refer to as partnership development is to seed a new way of collaborating and of working together, one that is inherently symbiotic and synergistic, where organizations, networks do not only seek their personal benefit, but really the relationships are woven in a way that bring about mutual benefit and also benefit to the whole that we are part of. And the weaving metaphor, of course, I find it extremely beautiful. This idea of braiding together different strands, whether they be knowledges, and by knowledges, I mean different ways of knowing, whether they be cosmovisions, whether they be ways of collaborating that are emergent, that are based on trust, on reciprocity. And so it's bringing together all of these different puzzle pieces, if we may, to grow together an ecosystem that is able to flourish. This approach that I've been adopting and kind of fine tuning because it's very experimental. I do not know what I'm doing. I'm just testing things and seeing how people and organizations respond. But really, the idea is to learn from living systems, to attune to the way nature was able to evolve and flourish throughout millennia, and to readopt these principles that ensure its flourishing.
Let's dive a little bit deeper. I love that you're testing things, and I believe you have created something called the Great Weaving Game, where you thread these things together, and it's for like a collective reimagination of reality. I myself am developing a mythopoetic card deck, which is full of archetypes and symbols. And my question then to you is, since you mentioned it, how has neurodivergence shaped your view of life and reality? And what does that mean in terms of the symbolic field, like the imaginal, like not the objects we can see, but the invisible things that have such great effect and influence on us? And how has neurodivergence helped you see this with more clarity?
Yeah, thank you so much, Alex, for this beautiful question. So yeah, growing up, I kind of felt like my neurodivergence, which is ADHD and also a little bit on the spectrum, struggling sometimes with, yeah, just traditional ways of relating. I used to feel like it was a curse. It was inadequacy. And growing up and unlearning so much about neurotypical, yeah, being neurotypical, what that means in terms of relationships and especially how we relate to nature. I've come to see it more as a superpower. And I was in conversation with my friend Alexander Laszlo recently, and the way he describes it, he was mentioning this sort of social scientific experiment where there is a bee that is stuck in a bottle, and the bee is trying to get out, and the light is actually placed at the kind of closed side, on the closed side of the bottle. And the bee keeps just bumping against that glass bottle, trying to get to the light. But if we place a fly inside, the fly will just try absolutely anything. And it will end up finding, the hole from which it can exit the bottle. And so I really see neurodivergence as this ability to just chart new pathways, to be radically open to the endless field of possibilities that we have ahead of us, and to try and test things and not really kind of be scared of failing. There is no failure on the path of learning. Everything, actually, when we fail, we learn even more. And so I have felt as though neurodivergence for me is actually closer to a sort of convergence with the more than human, with the ways trees and rivers and mountains speak and sing, and the ability to attune to that, and to be in conversation with the more than human. And I would say that finally, in terms of just the way it's shaped my life path and especially my professional path, it's been really a kind of opening in my personal life to be weird, as odd as this may sound. But it's almost, okay, you guys have labeled me as neurodivergent. I'm free now to actually say whatever, do whatever, to fail. And so it's really been this kind of encouragement to not follow the herd, but to, yeah, just go around and seek new ways of doing things.
Beautiful. I want to go back a bit to the braiding and weaving from your international or global connections and work, and also like how do you apply that with like local work or bioregional development work and influence, and how do you nurture right relationship, that term also, or that concept across people, movements, and the more than human world.
Yes, thank you for these questions. Realize I forgot to touch upon the more practical side of ecosystem weaving. So currently I'm serving in different organizations or networks, some well-known, others still under the radar. But the goal really is to create ecosystems of collaboration that support the flourishing of what we call islands of coherence in a sea of chaos. These islands of coherence are communities that are reclaiming ancient and also creating new forms of governance, of education, of decision making at the local level, of creating and exchanging value, which means economic systems. And so the idea is to create an ecosystem where these islands of coherence can begin to see themselves as part of a larger tapestry of transformative change, where these islands of coherence can cross-pollinate and learn from each other, and where we can begin to elevate sort of best practices, not in order to scale them, because this very idea of scaling something, I believe, is still part of the sort of modernist colonial way of approaching social change, but to just elevate these best practices so other communities around the world can begin to adopt and adapt these practices in their own local communities. And so we're doing this through various ways. In a coalition that I'm a part of, we're really building a movement for transformative change, bringing together these local communities with actors who are more on the intermediary level. So connecting them between them and building coalitions, both thematic and geographical. And in another organization that I'm a part of, we're building a sort of, or growing an ecosystem of education. So folks around North America mainly can begin to find the right resources, whether trainings, capacity development programs, toolkits, but also programs for emotional resilience and personal leadership development, conflict resolution, and so on. But a kind of library of all of these different offerings that folks might need in order to become themselves agents of change in their local communities. And you mentioned, the term bioregional. This is really the scale that we're looking at in all of these different ecosystem weaving activities. For very simple reasons, the current borders, the colonial imposed borders, do not take into account the sort of natural organization patterns that nature has. And so to align our work with bioregional boundaries, which are very porous and dynamic, is actually also an act of realigning with the wisdom of Gaia herself.
This community work is vital. I think it's crucial in our times. I'm part of what might be called the liminal web. And the liminal web is a collection of, let's say, meta-modern communities. Each one is a little bit different, but there's like a common field that's shared. I don't know that they have such toolkits, but there's a mapping project to try to identify the other liminal web communities. But I've also been parts of communities that have failed to cohere and just remain for years as kind of social gathering places, but failed to find a purpose or even a meaning. And so, a lot of people are just lurking and reading, and there are a few who participate, and there's no coherence. So how do you define right relationship and coherence? And what are some ways that a community can cohere and find some purpose or meaning?
So I would say that, well, let's start with right relationship, perhaps. What comes up for me for right relationship is care over control. And it's reciprocity rather than transactional, instrumental relationships. So again, this idea of mutual flourishing rather than this zero-sum game perspective. I studied politics in college, and I was just very much challenged with the sort of realist perspective of if I win, you lose. If you win, I lose. And it's like, how can we design win-win-win games? And actually, the Great Weaving is really about this. And so right relationship is also reverence, a sort of weaving sacredness back into the relational field and our ways of being together. And so for me, coherence really places right relationship at the center. And it's also, coherence has listening at the center. Because in order to cohere with other entities, whatever their nature might be, we have to attune to them and to attune to their needs, attune to the direction in which they're headed, and to align with that. And if we're all listening to each other, then coherence is able to emerge sort of on its own. And then emergence is at the center as well of coherence, the way I see it. Because if we're always trying to manipulate outcomes, we're not actually opening up to listening to each other and to aligning in that way that can ensure the social ecological flourishing of our community. And I might say also that with some communities that I've worked with here in Morocco, there wasn't much coherence either, and they're indigenous communities. We tend to really romanticize indigenous communities in a lot of ways, but they're actually facing, very similar challenges than we are. And increasingly, and this is more of an inquiry that I'm exploring, whether incoherence is actually part of coherence. In the West, we tend to see these as polarities, but actually, just like illness is part of health, the illness of the body allows our organism to develop defenses and become stronger and more resilient. Perhaps incoherence also has a role to play in coherence building.
Beautiful again. I love the way you frame things and you explain everything. I want to go a bit to female leadership and feminine energy, especially also from your experience in your country, which is an Arab country. And how did you, experience that? And how do you actually weave that into your work? So do you see feminine leadership more like is it a practice? Is it a presence? Is it an energy? So how does it influence basically the world that we are in, which is we are still running or being operated on a very masculine design systems? And I personally welcome, a lot the feminine energy that the world so badly needs. But I'm really interested in how that unfolded for you also, like personally and also in your country, and how do you see that on a cultural level evolving?
Yeah, thank you for this beautiful question. My experience growing up in Morocco as a young girl, and it's really difficult for me to sort of disentangle the sort of girl from the young and also the colonial aspect of it. But I'll just speak from my experience. I felt like my voice was not very much valued, that I had to speak another language and embody another kind of presence to actually belong or fit in. I think fit in is a better term for this. And I sense as though both the fact that I was a girl, that I was young, and then that I was attending a French school as a Moroccan girl, all of these elements played a key role in making me feel, and also the neurodivergence, in making me feel like I was not adequate in some way, shape, or form. And I have been on a journey, still walking the path of reclaiming parts of myself. And I think a really key part of myself that I lost because I was trying to fit into a society that is relatively still oppressive towards women is my capacity to love. And to this day, I notice that whenever I bring this language of care, love, radical friendship into spaces, their reactions, people are still very surprised to hear these words. And it's almost like, oh, here she goes again with her emotional stuff. And yet, we are increasingly coming to the realization that the root causes of the poly crisis are relational in nature, and the ways we relate to ourselves, to each other, to our more than human kin, to the cosmos at large. And yet we're still trying to intervene in the system to shift, leverage points. And we're not talking about friendship and love. And so for me, this is where feminine leadership comes in, and not women's leadership, but really feminine leadership. It's the ability to reclaim that language, to reclaim that kind of presence that is attuned to the relational field, that is attuned to whether right relationship is flourishing and guiding our every step, or a sense of let's control outcomes, let's shift things, let's engineer the world into something else than what it is. And I've had a realization recently while in India, attending a program, but it's this idea that the travelers, the path, and the destination are one and the same. Meaning the relationship between the travelers is the way and the destination. If we are in right relationship, this is actually the way we will walk the path together. And it is what we're seeking, is a world that is defined by right relationship. And so to sort of separate the three who from how and from what are we seeking, I feel as the right relationship collapses these three into a single one. And I'm also very aware of the sort of challenges that the masculine has been navigating. And the sort of, I would feel very disappointed if what I experienced as a young girl is experienced by young boys in the future. The sense that their masculine identity is somehow inadequate. And so I feel as though the work that you're doing, Rudy, with unconditional man is very important. It is also a reclaiming of our sacredness, whether we're men or women, and of our sacred role in bringing about the flourishing of our communities and the earth as a whole. And there are lots of discourses going on about violence, aggression in men, and how that is becoming, an obstacle that has always been an obstacle. And I feel like that is a very fertile soil to kind of nurture the sense of belonging of the masculine, of finding the rightful place of the masculine within our society, which the way I see it is to protect. And it is to create the container for the blossoming of all beings.
You speak of feminine leadership and you distinguish it from women being leaders. In other words, we have seen women in their masculine, very aggressive in the world, in the corporate world. Do you believe the feminine leadership can be carried by men as well? And we speak of Mother Earth, Pachamama, Gaia. Do you see this as a living being, like the planet itself is a living being that has legal rights? And is the feminine leadership something that can reclaim this planet as a living being with legal rights in the world?
Yeah, so for your first question, you're totally right. I have crossed paths with women who embodied masculine energy more than any man that I have met before. And I have met men who really embody feminine energy in a way that has left an imprint on me. And of course, feminine leadership is accessible and needed in both men and women. And really, it is the ability to attune to others' needs, to tend to those needs. And I really see feminine energy as almost an expression of the Tao and Taoism, but the Tao which nourishes all things but does not lord it over them, which is what mothers do in our society, totally invisible heroes who tend to the next generation with care and devotion. And yet the efforts are not recognized in the way society is currently structured. And so the feminine leadership is possible to embody for both men and women. And I really do see it as key to navigating this period of great unraveling. Because as structures begin to collapse and the cracks begin to appear, we will need that nurturing, caring energy to lift us up and also to bring us all together, which has been the role of women ancestrally to kind of tend to the communal bonds and ensure that no one is left behind. And your second question, I cannot.
The feminine act of seeing the other, recognizing the other, nurturing, taking care of, would mean then that we start to recognize the planet itself as a being. And as a being, it has legal rights, which today in our left rational brain, we're just seeing the planet as an object without a living, like being, like a full being with rights. It's interesting that we talk about AI and is AI sentient and does AI therefore is entitled to rights? But what about the planet itself? Is the planet sentient? And if we connect with the feminine way of being, can we then also recognize the planet as a legal entity itself?
Yes, this is really such a beautiful question. When I feel into masculine awakening versus feminine awakening, I just have this kind of embodied sense that masculine awakening is pure consciousness, divorced from physical reality. And in parallel, feminine awakening is a lot more embodied, and it is awakening through relationships, awakening through the redefinition of the self as inherently relational and as inherently, in an odd way, animal. So, what I've been sensing in my own experience the past few years is the awakening of the female mammal within me, of my animal nature, and to really feel into what that means in terms of how I show up in, the different spaces that I navigate, but with like a fierce love, the same way the female mammal has a fierce love for her newborn, a fierce love for the earth, for my mother, and of course, the recognition of, Gaia as a living, sentient, intelligent entity would kind of stem from this more feminine form of awakening. And I kind of have some reservations, although I believe that, the rights of nature are a necessary step. I still see it as part of the modern cosmovision of we need legal protection for us not to mess up this living entity. I think preferably, indigenous communities do not have any legal frameworks to ensure that nature is protected and revered, and they just do it. And they do it because of this sense of interbeing, of my well-being is invariably braided with the well-being of the ecosystem I inhabit. And we are kin. We're not just, living together and trying to flourish together. We're brothers and sisters with the rivers, with the mountains, with the trees. And so I really see this recognition of Gaia's rights as a necessary step, but hopefully a step that we can one day transcend, because we won't need that. Once we recognize ourselves as Gaia, we won't need laws to protect Gaia.
Hajar, you're a board member also of Gaia Education. So how do you see all this regenerative thinking and its importance into education? How do we bring that to children and into schools?
Yeah, this is also a great question. I'm actually in favor of unschooling. I am against education, although I work in education. And I just feel as though education right now is very hierarchical and unidirectional. It's the teacher, standing up, telling students what things are instead of a space of co-learning, also where other knowledges are welcomed and embraced. And by other knowledges, artistic creativity, dream work, interpreting dreams, and just introspective contemplation. And I also see education as sort of providing answers instead of helping us redefine the very questions we ask. So this critical thinking aspect. But of course, again, in some spaces that I navigate, we like to talk about the 3-horizon model. A horizon 1 being business as usual, where we are. Horizon 2, the kind of bridge that takes us to horizon 3, which is the sort of ideal case scenario. And so I see the work that Gaia Education is currently doing, and all other educational organizations, as being that bridge that can take us to that more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. And I sense as though for children, especially, this can be very transformational. The 3 of us and many others have been on a long journey of unlearning. And I sense as though tackling this from a young age and having tools and resources available for children, but mainly activities, because people learn by doing, not by necessarily listening, can actually help shift their worldview or shape their worldview towards a worldview of kincentrism, of kinship with all life, and a worldview of care and reverence towards each other and nature, towards life in general. And Gaia education. Yeah, I think that's it.
I'm not very familiar with unschooling, but what that brings up for me is kind of deprogramming. Like it seems to me in my life, I've been programmed into certain ways of thinking and being. My father was a diplomat and my educational background, and I have an MBA. And so I feel like I was deeply programmed into a way of being, a way of presenting myself. And in my journey, there has been quite a bit of unlearning, like looking at, oh, why do I believe this? And what has culture taught me? And what has my education taught me? And is it correct? Is it right? Why do I believe these things? And so for me, unschooling brings these things up. I don't know if that's right or not, but that's what brings it up for me. Kind of also like decolonizing the mind. Like how have I been colonized, especially into colonial mindset? And what do I need to become aware of and decolonize? So yeah, maybe you can speak a little bit more about unschooling.
Yes, for sure. So actually, one of the key sort of figures that has inspired me to dive deeper into the topic of unschooling in general is Manish Jain, the founder of Swaraj University in India and the founder also of Ecoversities Network. And so the Ecoversities Network is doing exactly that. It is sort of charting new educational pathways, and it's not so much education, it's more learning, co-learning pathways, reclaiming ancient ways of knowing and being in relationship with community, with ancestors, with the earth. And this has been very transformational in the work that I have been doing, trying to create spaces of unlearning and co-learning that challenge the assumptions of the traditional educational system, and to root really these learning processes back into place, back into community, and back into communion with the earth and the local biological ecosystem that surrounds us.
My next question is about play. My personal journey, when I was 16, I was so much into jazz. And, I realized much later that it was actually the opening for myself to always stay open, to always play, to always try new things. And I remember this quote from Miles Davis, who always said to his musicians, don't play what's there. He said, play what's not there. And so throughout my life, I have always been, or music, art, culture, community, have always been very present in my life. And also they gave me an edge of what other peoples did not have because they were trained a certain way or just to be programmed to operate in a certain field. And, for me, regeneration is a lot about, letting go of, unlearning, unschooling. So you can basically create space for, to receive new things, to enjoy new things. So I want to hear from you or learn from you because you're also a new generation. And how much is play and joy and also your work around imagination is important, for movements of change.
Yeah, this is such a beautiful question once again. Yeah, I really appreciate the quality of the questions you both are asking. Play is really at the center of the Horizon 3 future I envision, or the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. Play is an act of radical resistance to the forces of modernity, of coloniality, of extraction. It is the expression of the joy of being alive, the celebration of the gift of being alive here and now together. And with that kind of energy that play brings, everything becomes possible. And so in one of the communities that I've been working with here in Morocco, we've actually designed games for the youth. This is in the High Atlas Mountains. Designed games for the youth where, they can engage in community service, whether by picking up the trash, by helping farmers when it's harvest season, by helping neighbors also rebuild, after the earthquake. And they gain points whenever they engage in these activities. And at the end of the month, we kind of add up all the points. And then the gift is offered to the community as a whole. It can be a sewing machine for the mothers of the community. It can be a tractor for farmers. And so also redefining the very games we play. The economic system is a zero-sum game. The richer I am, the poorer others are. But to create games where we win and make our entire community, the entire community of life, and the place we're rooted win with us, that is extremely powerful. And also, we learn best by playing. When we're playing, we are open, radically open to what surrounds us. And we can repeat the same thing again and again, the same task, the same activity again and again, and remain open to it in a way that traditional learning processes do not allow. And play is sometimes when I am taking a walk in nature, I cannot help but recognize the trees and their branches like this as a celebration. And it's so striking and so clear in those moments that everything around me is a celebration of life. And it's almost this veil of illusion, or Maya in Buddhist terminology, that keeps us from accessing that recognition. And when we play, we reconnect with that timeless wisdom. And the last thing I'll mention is what I love the most about play is its uselessness. Everything we do because we're seeking a certain kind of outcome or output. With play, the goal is play itself. And to have that possibility, especially as children, rather than sitting down and listening to a teacher tell us about the world, I feel is very valuable.
I love that. And it brings to mind for me storytelling and the narratives that we have and archetypes. And for example, you were talking about consciousness as like the masculine is the field of consciousness and the feminine is the creation in that consciousness, which is the archetype of Shiva and Shakti. Shakti creates, she reveals and conceals, and Shiva is the field. It's that still lake, and Shakti are the waves. And it seems to me that we are now in this competitive dynamics, like this, the whole storytelling of the economy is around scarcity and individualism and competition. And this is a deep story, a deep program that we have. And so I wonder, for this new world that our hearts know is possible, this new beautiful world our hearts know is possible, do we need to create new stories, new narratives? Do we need to find new archetypes to inspire us? How do you see this?
I would say yes, we need to create new stories. We need to revive old ones, and we need to attune to the stories that are already being told everywhere around us. There is a line from a poem that I absolutely love, and it is, "Another world is not only possible, she is on her way." I believe I'm paraphrasing here. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. And so to really attune to those stories that are emerging from spaces and places like the Sarvodaya movement in Sri Lanka, an absolutely beautiful bottom-up revolutionary movement of communities, villages that have come to the realization that no one is coming to save us. If there are roads to build or hospitals or schools, let us come together and build them together. And so it's this sort of reclamation of agency on a personal level and on a communal level. And I'm losing the thread, sorry.
Yeah, it's like moving away from, like, for example, very individualistic
Mhm.
ways of being and seeing into more like collective ways, and that would be like shifting the storytelling, shifting our internal narrative, that we're not just alone competing against everyone else.
Mhm.
We're actually part of a community. I used to have a story for myself that I am becoming a lighthouse, and I will be the light for other people. And then, something changed in me and said, this is a very lonely story. Like, why am I a lighthouse? There's boats and sailboats, and here I am, a lighthouse. What is this? And I shifted my narrative to becoming a tree. I am a tree in a forest. Like, I can be a tall tree in a forest, but as a tree, I participate in the forest. There's a mycelial network, and I give and I receive, and I give shade to animals. And this was a much more rich, imaginal, joyful story for myself, to see myself as a tree in the community rather than as a lighthouse on a rock.
Beautiful. And yeah, I love the example you give with the tree. And this is something that we've experimented with the great weaving. To not just seek to write new stories, but to write stories from a new perspective as well. So we engage in radical imagination as Gaia, as this specific river or this specific mountain. And we imagine together what this more beautiful world looks and feel like. And then we map existing seeds that can support this world's flourishing. And that exercises something shifts on a really ontological level when we're able to imagine and write something from another perspective, a non or a more than human perspective. We realize that identity is a lot more fluid, dynamic, adaptable than we think it is. It can really shape shift, and we can be Gaia, we can be the tree and imagine from that perspective. So, yeah, new stories and new perspectives, new standpoints from which we tell those stories as well.
Yeah, Hajar, we're coming near the end of this podcast, but I wanted to ask a last question. So, in the Western world or modern world, we often overlook the intelligence of, Mother Nature or Gaia, and I always refer to that like the seed of an oak tree, for example, carries so much wisdom. It carries thousands, if not millions of years of wisdom and evolution. And so that seed carries all the wisdom also to grow roots and become an ecosystem for the mycelia. It will become, a tree and, create oxygen for us and, decarbonize the air and then become a whole ecosystem for lots of animals and insects and whatever. So just that seed has so much potential if we just look at nature, how it is. So I would like to hear from you, like if you could carry one seed into the future for future generations, which seed would it be?
Yeah, another beautiful question, yet another one. Yeah, I feel like what you mentioned about the earth, being this sort of repository of so much knowledge, so much wisdom. And so I think the seed that I want to carry with me forward is this ability to find ways beyond our rational minds, the sort of living systems, studying and research and so on, but to find ways to tap into that wisdom. I have a friend, that whenever I ask, he's really into herbalism. And so whenever I ask, what is this plant good for? He says, Haji, just drink it and ask it, and it will tell you what it is for. And so this is embracing other ways of knowing in action, reclaiming our ability to commune with the more than human world, to learn together with the more than human world, and to really believe, it's almost like this reclamation of our childlike ability to communicate with everything around us, something that we've lost with the passing of time, but to try again and again with patience and to listen closely enough. And I think we might, learn or unlearn a few things here and there.
Beautiful, Hajar. I must say I'm in pure awe also of how clear and embodied, you carry your wisdom and this regenerative wisdom. And I'm so happy to see that in the younger generation, because I truly believe that we are planting the seeds for the next big paradigm shift. Yeah, so what is happening now, what we see around us is a huge rites of passage for us as humanity, but we will need to stand into that fire also to hold that polarity and sow new seeds for a new world to emerge. So I want to thank you for all your wisdom and your sharings here. And I wish you a most beautiful future ahead. Alex, do you have a last word?
Oh, thank you, Hajar. I very much enjoyed the conversation, and I'm glad we went a little bit deeper. And I very much appreciate your perspectives. And yeah, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you both, Rudy and Alex, for also embodying a beautiful kind of masculine, feminine, and for the beautiful questions you've asked today. And I'm reminded of a quote by Ram Dass who says, "We're all walking each other home." And it's been a joy to walk each other home today. So thank you.
Thank you, Hajar.
Sing no more, naked days are you.